Well, good morning. We appreciate you guys taking time to invest with us here this morning. Our topic is going to be around National Corn Growers Association. As several of you growers have probably got in your mail, you've got a magazine around the NCGA and its winners. And when you look at that magazine, you get something like what we see right here with all entrants, then national winners. A lot of questions we get within how to improve our yield and increase our yield is around a lot of these basic additions to nutrition to our program. What we want to do here this morning is highlight some things that come to sight here. We will look at all entrants that were submitted in the National Corn Growers Yield Contest. All entrants average around 248 bushel. The national winners out of each category was around 383 bushels. What we want to highlight next is the average plant population to get to that is 33,785 is the average plant population for all entrants, and the national winners was around 39,000. Now a lot of times people ask us, what should we do when we get to increasing our yield? One of the most frequent responses to increase our population. Now I think we can use some simple math around where we need to be. In the industry we say we need around, for every 1,000 kernels we plant, we should get at least 8 bushel to possibly 10 bushel per 1,000 we put on. As you can see here, when we do that type of math, we are under that 8 bushel with all these entrants. And then when we look at our national winners, we're above that 8, and we're between that 8 and 10 bushels per 1,000 kernels that we put on there. The question we should be asking ourselves then is if we aren't above that 8,000 per 1,000 kernels, 8 bushel per 1,000 kernels, we shouldn't be looking at increasing our population, but some other type of management practice that we tend to do within our operation. So we want to kind of fall down into the next category here is nitrogen per bushel as well. That's a frequent thing that we ask is how much nitrogen should we put on per bushel of corn that we're yielding out there. And you'll see the differences here between the all entrants they put on roughly 227 pounds and they're yielding 247. On the national winners, they put 323 on and it yielded them 383. These are all averages, but it gets to that question that you guys ask a lot of us as agronomists. What I want to highlight next to is phosphorus. You can see we put on around 60 pounds with all these entrants, but when we get into these national winners, we put on 102 pounds of phosphorus. So we're doubling the amount of phosphorus. I know a lot of us get worried about where our parts per million are, but just in the sheer differences is you can see there's a vast difference on amount of P that they're putting on versus some of these others out here in the other entrants. Then we look at our potassium. We're at 28.5 pounds of potassium versus 210 pounds of potassium. I know a lot of times working in Nebraska, we say we've got enough potassium in our soils. We may look like we do with our soil tests, but is it available long enough or quick enough during our grand growth stage when we need a lot of potassium to go on? So we might need to be looking at different levels just in general when it comes to potassium and how we look at that going further. Next is trace elements. So these would be like our secondary and our micronutrients. You look at all of our entrants here, 88% of us say that they use trace elements. Then you look at the national winners, they say 33% use trace elements. So a couple of things bear the question. Do they just consider these trace elements to be more of these standard elements, or are they actually not putting as much on because they're using things like manure or stuff like that that have those in there? Okay? So those are some things we need to dig deeper in, but these are the answers that they said here around that. Okay, and we're going to be looking here furthermore on some of these as we get in the meeting. But next, after we look at this, out of the national winners, I added the top 4 consistent answers to the basics that add bushels. And so I composited all those answers, and these are the top 4 responses that we get from these national winners. First, planning considerations. That is the number 1 response that these winners said is planning considerations is their number 1 thing that they say affect basic adding bushels. Okay? Second, placement and timing of nutrients. So once we identify the nutrients, placing is important, as well as the timing of those nutrients to fit specific timings when they will yield us the best response. Third, they measure things to determine the crop nutrient inputs. So whether that be soil samples or plant analysis or plant tissue analysis, they are measuring these plants throughout the growing season, as well as before and after, to see what's available for their plants to take up. And then fourth is managing your hybrids to the style, the way you farm. Now, as you guys are buying your seed, or as you have bought your seed, what you should be asking yourself, have I bought the genetics that fit the style of way I'm going to farm? Okay. Now, we want to get into, there's 17 essential nutrients that our plants require to physiologically to complete their plant growth and development stages, from germination clear out to plant physiology, okay, to the end of its growth cycle. There's 17 essential nutrients. You can see here is I start with oxygen. This was the year that it was identified to be an essential nutrient. That was in 1804. Then you get into a nutrient we use a lot is nitrogen. Clear back in 1887, they found that to be an essential nutrient. The last one that hit the stage was nickel, and this was in 1983 when they identified this to be an essential nutrient. The question we should be asking ourselves is, are we looking to make sure all of these essential nutrients are at the level we need to have when we're growing our crops, when it comes to corn, soybeans, alfalfa, wheat, whatever we're putting in the ground? Next here is, I think we get this pretty good here, is this is the stave in the bucket is the lowest stave is something we need to focus on. So whether that be a nutrient or that be some type of soil condition, whatever's the lowest stave is what we need to address to make sure we're going to increase our yields. The next, though, over here in this circle is showcasing interactions that happens in the soil now. So we get interactions that are both synergistic as well as antagonistic. Okay? One thing I want to highlight here is we focus a lot on our phosphorus levels. If we got such high phosphorus levels, we can now directly impact, that arrow is going towards zinc, and it can impact the zinc availability. So if we got too high in phosphorus levels, we can make a bond called zinc phosphate, which then renders that to be unavailable for the plant to take up. So we need to address that with what type of form of zinc we're using now. So these are a circle that we need to get a little bit more interested in to know these interactions that happen in the soil. So next is one thing that the agronomists within Farmers Pride come and talk to you a lot about is managing our soil's pH. Most of the time we want to see a pH of about 6.2 up to about 6.8, kind of in that little acidic range. What that allows is the most available of these nutrients to be available for our plant to take up. So one of the things I see a lot of us forego is not managing our pH. As we naturally put on more nitrogen, we're making that soil become more acidic. So more of our bottoms and those types of areas become acidic, and that impacts some of our availability of some of these nutrients. Now, if on some of our clay knobs and our hills out there, we get into these higher pHs, that also impacts availability of some of these nutrients that we're trying to manage. Last is what we want to highlight here is when we think about nutrients in our soil, so iron, zinc, copper, nickel, and manganese, that's what's in our soil. Here's the different solution forms that are in the soil. So if we look at iron, it's in the form of iron++ as well as iron+++. But the plant, what we're interested in is primarily wanting to take these nutrients up in what we call a divalent cation level. So if you look at iron, we got it in two different forms, iron plus plus as well as iron plus plus plus. But the plant wants to take it up as iron plus plus. So knowing what forms the plant wants to take it up, we can adjust that with what types of nutrients we're using, with what types of forms, as well as how to manage that within that plant. Okay, so getting into this type of level is what we want to do when we're getting into some of our management decisions around the nutrition that we're going to require and request for you to look at. So starting with your nutrition program really impacts how successful we are. And so if you got further questions and information you would like to have, contact one of your Farmers Pride agronomist in your territory. Thank you.